What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over match flow part 2, and just general match flow, match rounds, round timer, number of rounds, things like that. So it's just a bunch of stuff thrown together regarding the flow of our matches, different rounds and getting knocked down and getting back up. We have a round counter now. So you can see I can control my characters as usual. I've actually moved the camera a little bit closer, allowed the players to get a little bit closer. That is just a personal preference. It has no relationship to this specific episode. Wanted to show you how that looked, get some opinions on that. Okay, so as far as this goes, we now have a round counter. So the round counter, those 3 little dots below the health bar. 3 little circles that are not filled in currently. They're just gray. They're going to become gold when we win. And we also have the round timer going down. So first of all, let's go ahead and win a round. It's going to be a little bit of a hacky method because I'm literally just going to beat this guy up until he gives me what I want. And there we go. Now he's knocked out. I get a win. He gets back up. The timer stops, the fight text comes up, and then the timer continues. Now, you can also reset the timer there. It depends on the game. I pulled from a few different references. A lot of times the timer does not reset in between rounds, but will reset if it runs out entirely. So, that's up to you. But you can see how I've won a game. I have a gold circle there for winning. If I beat this guy again, I should get 2 gold circles. Don't worry about that little animation where he kind of flies forward. That's just due to some root motion on his knockback, his knocked out animation. I'll show you with this guy. So now let's say player 2 wins. He's going to knock player 1 back quite a bit. And then my new animation is him getting up, but there's no root motion, so it looks a little funny. I'll be cleaning up the animations as we go throughout the series as usual, but I just wanted to point that out. It's not an issue with any of the logic we've done, just because I'm using specific animations that I have access to. Now you can see the timer has run out, but it has not ended the round. This logic can be up to you. For me, I had it to be kind of like a sudden death, where if you're tied at the amount of health you have at the end, then you won't run out of health. It won't just say draw. You'll actually have to attack your opponent, and whoever lands the next hit and takes some health away will win the round. So for example, if player 2 were to hit me, then player 2 wins the round because he's got more health when the timer's at 0. So let's go ahead and check this out and see how we're doing all this. We're going to need to work with our base game mode HUD, our default game mode BP, our mute and BP, and add some variables to the code as well as some events to trigger. So to get started, if you have not watched any episodes of this tutorial, we're on episode 52, so if you're interested in catching up, I will leave a link in the iCard in the top right corner to the very first episode of this series. Also, if you're just interested in watching round timers and round flow, I'll show you the first episode of that part of this series, which is last episode, episode 51, right here. Okay. So getting started, let's add what we need to add to the code. I add win round as a function. I add notify round start as an implementable event, notify round end, blueprint implementable event, and update HUD round icons. Win round is just blueprint callable. We have to actually use this function in code. We have to write it in there and perform the logic in there. Okay. And we're also going to need a variable on the player called has lost round. You could also do has won round and just do the opposite. It doesn't really matter. We just have to know who has won and who has lost. And we can do it in the game mode, and that's a perfectly fine location, but one way or another, the character has to get the information if they won or lost because they need to perform their pose. So we're not currently doing anything for if they win the round, but if they win the round, they might want to do a victory pose, and if they lose the round, then I'm doing the thing where they get knocked over and get back up. Okay, also, let's make sure we add an integer called rounds1. It's the first integer we have in Fighter Template Character, if you've been following this tutorial exactly. But regardless, we're adding an integer to essentially just determine how many rounds we've won, to display that to the HUD, and to tell the game mode when we've actually won the game and things like that. So rounds 1. And let's go into our fighter template character.cpp and set our default values. Rounds 1, of course, on construct is 0. And then has lost round is false by default because, of course, when you get started, you haven't automatically lost the round. Now we can scroll down all the way. We don't really need to perform any logic in any of the other functions we've already written, but we do need to, of course, write the win round function. So here's win round. And essentially, the way I've set it up is I trigger other player has lost round, and you'll notice I'm not doing some sort of safety check here, like if other player. To be completely honest, if the other player does not exist at this point, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of this stuff and take damage. It would be kind of useless for them not to be valid at this point, and you still get here. However, by all means, feel free to do a safety check. It's probably a better idea. I like showing you guys that how I kind of do my logic and how I think around it. And it's not always correct. You see, sometimes I fix it in a later episode when something else comes up. But I like to show you the whole process because game development is not just a one and done. Like, oh, I wrote this and it's good. So I like to show you that. Rounds 1, we have to increment. So we tell the other player of the player that is calling win round, we tell the other player that they have lost. We increment, that's what plus rounds 1 means. The player that won the round, their number of rounds won. And then we notify round end and update HUD round icons. You don't need 2 different blueprint implementable events here, so feel free to use one. However, I like to separate the logic when the logic is completely different. Like, sure, they're both logic to occur on a round end, but this one is literally just occurring when a round ends. It doesn't have anything to do with winning or losing for this character. It's just performing the logic of, okay, determine, stop the timer, determine to call the fight text, things like that. And the update HUD round icons is going to fill in the little circle. So I like to keep them separate in case I have to change them down the line. That way I don't have to change a bunch of stuff down the line to make it to work. I can change this one function and, leave this one alone. All right, let's go into the blueprints as usual. So if I go over, let's start in the character blueprint actually. Just realized I don't have that one open. Hold on. Here we go. So I have notify round start, notify round end. Remember, we made these blueprint implementable events. And then here's update HUD round icons. So let me just show you what all 3 of these are doing, and then we'll cover them. So to get these events to pop up after you've made them in your header file, as we have here, you're going to go ahead and build in Visual Studio, build solution. Once that completes, you'll go ahead and compile in Unreal if necessary, and you should get it to pop up. And then you just come in the character or whatever class you made the blueprint implementable event in and search for it. Event, notify, round, and you can see they're coming up here. So, in the constructor for our character, I was originally just casting the game mode to the fighter template game mode and getting player 2. I am now dragging off of this to set a game mode reference. You can just drag off and promote to variable, and you can see I have a game mode reference, which is my fighter template game mode. Not entirely necessary, but doing that will make our lives easier, because if that ends up being valid, again, something you should probably check before using it, then we can go ahead and cast it to our default game mode BP and call the proper function. The reason I am casting it is because at this point when the characters are spawned, the blueprint game mode does not always exist. You have to be careful when different blueprints rely on each other. It could cause a circular dependency where you cannot open your editor simply because one is trying to access the other and the other is trying to access that one, and they cannot load at the same time. You need one to load and the other one needs the other to load, and that's not good. So I go ahead and load the code class, which I know will be available, and then I can cast it later and see if the cast succeeds. But in round start and round end, I essentially use the game mode reference, cast it to our blueprint game mode, and then call the corresponding function. Round start calls round start, round end calls round end. And you probably won't have these events yet. You'll have round start from part 1 if you watch that, but you can go ahead and make them now, even if we don't fill them out now. Just add custom event for round start and add custom event for round end. Again, if you're already watching this, if you watch part 1, then you already have the logic and event tick, so you can go ahead and ignore this for now. The only thing we're going to add is this time over. Okay. So the last thing we need to do in our character is our update HUD round icons event. Now, in our character, we already have a HUD reference. It's a reference to the HUD. It's quite simple. It's a reference to our base game mode HUD. All we need to do is, when this event fires, we get our HUD reference. Make sure it's valid. The way you get it to look like this is when you have an object or an actor or whatever, when you have a reference here, in a variable form, you can right click on it and hit convert to validated get, and then here's your reference. Here's if it's valid or not. So you can see I'm using the reference to call an event on the HUD, but I'm checking to make sure that it's valid before doing so. So let's go ahead and start there actually. Of course, to do this you'll need that proper function and or event. For me, I go into base game mode HUD, and I've made a new custom event called Update Round Icons. I also have a new one called Trigger New Round Messages. In episode 1, we were triggering screen messages, which is the ready fight. New round messages, I don't want to say ready every time, I just have it triggering fight and disappearing, and then starting a new round. So go ahead and make 2 custom events. Again, add custom event. One for update round icons, one for trigger new round messages, and make sure once you make update round icons, you call it in your character. Okay, so update round icons isn't too bad. We essentially just need to grab the number of wins that we have and fill out the appropriate number of circles, or translate them to the gold image, whatever it is that we're doing. So all these are, I've just grabbed 3 images for each, both player 1 and player 2. I have lined them up appropriately. You can take a look at my spacing if you'd like. Though of course that's not necessary, and you'll probably use your own spacing and images anyway. But all I've done is set the image to be a round circle, is what I called it, which is the little circle texture that I made. I put 3 of them. I did name them 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. You see the way that they're named? So 1, 2, 3 is 1 is always the frontmost, 2 is the middle, and 3 is always the backmost, regardless of what side you're on. So they're actually reversed. Player 1, this is 1, and 3 is the one all the way to the left. But in player 2, 1 is the one all the way to the left because it's at the front of the health bar, and 3 is all the way to the right. The reason I did that is because it'll make our lives easier as we're updating these icons to determine which one to fill out, but do it whatever way makes you feel comfortable. Just make sure that you take note of the way I did it so you see why I'm doing what I'm doing. What we need to do is check our game mode reference to make sure it's valid, and then we check player 1 to make sure they are valid. You could also have references to player 1 and 2 in your HUD. However, the entire time we've been doing our bindings, we've just been grabbing the game mode reference to grab player 1 and 2. So I'm just going to keep doing that to avoid confusion. So get your game mode reference, convert to validated get, grab player 1 reference off of that, convert to validated get. If these are both valid, then we want to update round circles for player 1, and we want to update round circles for player 2. You can see I also get player 2, convert to validated get. And you don't have to do this. You could update it, based on whoever wins. However, if you want to put an X over that round to say, oh, this player lost, or something like that, or a different symbol for a tie, then I just go ahead and update both. Doing this once every time a round is won is not going to kill your performance at all if you do it on both, even if nothing changes. So I think it's just the easier solution here. Okay, update round circles. That's a function that we made in here. So go ahead and add a new function called update round circles. And it's very big, but it's very simple. The logic is just spread out because there's a lot of cases here. So you can see I've added 2 input parameters called player index in rounds 1, integer and integer. Player index determines if it's player 1 or 2. So index of 0 is player 1, index of 1 is player 2. And rounds 1 it comes from the rounds 1 variable that we made in the character file. Okay, so what we do is we call update round circles on player index 0 first time around for player 1. And we do a check in here immediately. The very first thing we do. See if player index is 0. So we determine if it's player 1 or player 2. If it's 0, which it is in this case, we go up to this switch statement where we grab rounds 1 and throw it in. And then I put this to my maximum amount of rounds. If you plan on letting the players change the amount of rounds, that's perfectly fine. You'll just have to check and see what the rounds are set to before you determine which set of switch statements you might use. So our switch statement is just 0, 1, 2, or 3. So 0 rounds, 1 round, 2 rounds, and 3 rounds 1. If we're doing, you have to win 3 rounds, so that makes sense. And what you do is you go off of each of these and just set the round counters appropriately. If 0 rounds have been won by player 1, then we're going to want to set all of our rounds to be the round circle. The round circle is the default have not won this round. You can see when we've won 1 round, then we have win round circle. And then the second counter is round circle, third counter is round circle. So we're literally just saying set the appropriate amount of images. Now you can go ahead and bind this or come up with another way that's a little bit faster to make than this, but this won't be an issue performance-wise or anything like that, and it's a pretty foolproof method. Of course, to update it could be a little bit of work, like if you want to make it 5, then you got to copy these and do it. But I don't think you're going to have too many rounds, maybe like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, even if you did all of them, which I don't think all of them are normally an option. Doing this is quite easy. All you do is grab the round counter image. Again, we made 6 of them, 3 for each player. Just drag it onto the screen. Make sure you're working, if we're on player 1, because it was player index 0, then make sure you're using the P1 round counters. And then you go ahead and call set brush. Then you break the brush, you right click on it and hit split struct pin. Then you select the asset you want, which for me was just round counter, I believe, round circle. And you're good to go. Then you can copy this over and over again. It's the same node every single time. We're just following the logic. And make sure you switch out the image that we're changing their brush. So each time we're going to do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. But this time, the first round counter is going to be a win. Then, if they have 2 rounds won, round counter 1 and round counter 2 are going to be wins. Round counter 3 is just going to be a normal one. Then, if we won 3, all 3 round counters are going to be win round circle as the image. Otherwise, the logic is quite simple. So if player index equals 0 is false, and you can see when we call it in the event graph for player 2, we pass in player index 1. So it is in fact false. We're going to take this route. Now we take num rounds again, num rounds of player 2, and we do the same logic. You can see I'm using P2 round counter, P2 round counter, P2 round counter, and it's the same logic. At 0 rounds 1, all of them are the default circle. 1 round 1, we have round counter 1 as a win. At 2 rounds 1, 2 round counters are a win. And at 3, they're all wins. That's a very simple way to do a round counter. That is differentiated between player 1 and player 2. And those circles are appropriately updated. So we're still going to need the trigger new round messages logic in here. So I'm going to keep this base game mode HUD open, but we're done for the circles as far as that goes for now. Now, let's go into our mutant anim BP, because we're going to set up some of the logic that's going to help us determine what animation our character should be in, like when they get knocked down and things like that. And then it's going to help us determine when we should start the new round. So, from idle to round lost knockdown. It's a new state. You're familiar with this by now, but right-click and add state and add a new one. This state is essentially what we want the player to do when they lose the round. It doesn't have to be getting knocked down. It could be whatever animation you want to add. But I have this one where the guy gets hit and falls backward. Okay. Make sure it's not set to loop. And the logic to get from idle to this state is just has lost round. Remember, we made that variable, that boolean, in the character. So all we have to do is grab our character reference, grab has lost round, and do that. I do also have a animation transition event. So on end transition event, I call get ready for next round. So once the player is done going from idle to this animation and they are completely on the ground, then I call this event. That's how that logic works. Then we're stopping the character from getting back up to resume their fighting until we consider them to have not lost the round. So the reason we're doing this is because essentially once they get knocked down, we say, okay, player 1 won the round, or player 2 won the round. Then we reset the variables to say, okay, this character has no longer lost the current round. They can step back up and get back into the fight. So remember, we were calling this event. I called it get ready for next round. We're going to go ahead and check that out in the event graph. Get ready for next round. In this function, we're going to set the character to not be able to move once they get knocked out. We want them to be stationary on the ground. Makes sense. We don't want them to be moving around while they're laying down. Then I'm going to add some more artificial delays. Remember, here it's not really bad because delay is literally what we want. We just want some time in between the rounds. We don't want it to be instant. So we make it so the character can't move. They're on the ground. We give a 2-second delay. Mind you, in this time, the character that won can still be walking around. That is intended. You can turn that off by disabling the other characters, the other player movement. Okay? And then we're going to reset mutant character reference. They have no longer lost the round. Make sure you set this to be false. Then they can get back up. And the way it works is, see, now this transition will be valid. There's no events or anything. Then we'll go to the getting up animation. Now the getting up animation, make sure you don't set it to loop again. And all it is it's him standing up. Then the way that the mutant goes from getting up to idle is automatic rule based, so there's no rules. Just when the animation is done, he can return to idle. However, we do have an event I call can move on start transition event, which allows him to be able to walk again after he's gotten up, so he doesn't just get up and go straight to fight. And remember what can move does. Can move simply sets the character to be able to move again, so he can walk back and forth. He won't be able to attack yet. We have not set can attack to be true. They cannot attack while the fight text is up. Then, once the player has started getting up, as soon as this goes to false, we have a 3-second delay, and we go ahead and use our character reference to cast our mutant character BP, as we've done in other parts of this animation blueprint. This mutant character reference is our code class, and we need it to be that for reasons. But in this case, we need to grab the HUD reference that this character has. So I'm going to cast my mutant character reference to my mutant character BP class right here, which has the HUD reference on it. And then we're going to call it trigger new round messages off of that. Okay? Now, let's go to trigger new round messages. Follow that back to the base game mode HUD. Here's our event. And we're essentially going to do the same logic we were doing in trigger screen messages. So if you have this logic down, you can go ahead and copy it and just remove what we don't need. But we're going to call our make fight text function, which essentially grabs the middle text of our screen, sets the text to be fight, and sets it to be visible. That one's pretty simple, and we did that last episode, but there's a refresher. Then I add a 1-second delay in between and hide the text, so it's up for 1 second, and then we set the middle screen text to be hidden. Then we go ahead and call game mode reference round start. So remember, we have our game mode reference now. You can check if it's valid if you'd like, and then call round start on it. Now we go into our default game mode BP and look at the round start function. Okay, so for round start, what we do is we make sure that timer is active once the round has started. This is to stop it from being active when the text is up on the screen, like the fight text or the ready text. We only want it to be valid once the round is officially started and the characters can attack again. So is timer active? True once the round starts. Then player 1 and player 2 can attack so we can resume beating each other up. And then I set their health back to 1.0. We'll probably want to do like a little fill-up effect on the progress bar to make it look nice, but for now we can just force it to be 1 when the round starts, and that'll work. Okay, then round end is essentially the same as it was last time in episode 1 of the match flow, but going over it again, we check to make sure that the timer is false now because the round ended. We don't want the timer to continue ticking at the moment, and then we go ahead and make sure player 1 and player 2 cannot attack. Lastly, in event tick, which we also had last time, we have updated a bit. So is timer active is the only time that this tick logic is going to go through, if it's true. We make sure that the round time minus the last tick, like the delta seconds and last tick, is greater than or equal to 0. If it's not, we're going to go ahead and just force the round time to be 0. If it is, we just set the new round time. But if we're forcing it to be 0, this means we reached our absolute minimum value, and we are ready to end the round based on time. So I went ahead and made a function called time over, which we're going to call here. Just add a new function, call it time over. In time over, we're going to grab player 1 and player 2. Remember, we're in the game mode, so we have these references as variables. We're going to get the player health for both of them, and we're going to determine who's the winner here. So if player 1's health is greater than player 2's health, we're going to go ahead and call win round for player 1. Remember, win round is our code function that we made right here. If this is false, that player 1's health is greater than player 2's health, then we're going to do the same logic, but we're just going to check if player 1's health is less than player 2's health, and then call win round on player 2. If this is false, then you can do draw logic if you want to. You don't have to. I intentionally left it blank, so it's, again, brings into some sort of sudden death mode where whoever hits the next one first goes down. However, you may want to reset your time after all these conditions. What you can do is just drag off of each of these and set time, set round time, and set it back to 99. So if the win/loss was due to time running out, then we know that the time is 0. I don't know why copying that did not work. And we can go ahead and reset the time. And I'll show you that in action real quick, just to show you that it works. Okay, so the time is going to start running out. I will beat up the guy a little bit so we win the round, and then I will show you exactly where we are. While we wait for this to run out, I'd just like to talk about a few things. So first of all, guys, we are going to be doing Throws Part 2 very soon, Air Combat Part 2 very soon, and probably another Hitbox episode to kind of wrap up all 3 of those sections that we made them and they're functional, but they could be a little bit better. And then we can go on to potentially story mode with AI or online networking. But anyway, I just want to mention that we're going to be getting into that, and thank you to everyone who's been supporting this series to let this go for 52 episodes. We've essentially gone for 1 year now because 1 episode a week. So thank you guys very, very much for the support on this series. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying it too. This is really fun. So let me know what you need. Let me know if you want specific videos, and I'm going to try and get through them all. Thanks again, guys. And any second now, the guy should die due to the time, and we should be granted a victory, and the timer should reset. There you go. You can see the timer is still frozen because it's not active. And there we are. So we can obviously make this neater by, adding some animations to our HUD, like filling up the progress bar, or maybe resizing the timer as we reset it to look like new time has been added. There's a lot of different things we can do here. But for now, this is good. This is essentially all of match flow that we need. The only other thing we really need is to determine what happens when we win. Or in a story mode situation, what happens when we lose. Like, does a menu come up and we have to continue? In Versus, is it just, okay, here's your menu, display the winner, doing his winning animation, and then have this menu that determines if they want to do rematch, things like that. So we'll do one more episode on match flow. I don't know exactly, that might be the next episode, but if not, just look for it. It should be coming out very soon. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching this episode and supporting the series. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for the channel than anything else you can do. It's completely free. I do want to send a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters and my YouTube membership supporters. Thank you guys so much for believing in me enough over this past year to support me on those platforms. If you're interested in checking that out, I've got the benefits right here. I'll put in the description. You can check out what you get for different tiers and things like that. But thank you guys so much for all of you. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord. It's a nice little community we have where we can help each other out with issues we're having in the code or blueprints. The link is in the description. I can't put in an iCard because YouTube does not like that. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch, I've recently been playing Man of Medan with my friend David, and it's been a lot of fun trying that new game out. So if you want to come check us out over there, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. I'm going to put the link in the iCard in the top right corner. You can go ahead and click that to go to my YouTube channel where all my archive streams are. And I cannot link you to the Twitch streams, but it is in the description. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.